Live from the glorious city of Melbourne
and live from the USA,
your superstar hosts, Michael Sopel.
I'm going to say we play and win a final.
Sam Manhannett.
The top four.
Like it.
Carlton.
There it is. There it is. I was waiting for it.
This is In the Ballpark.
Hello and welcome to In the Ballpark. I'm Sam Manhannett, of course, joined by Michael Sopel. Welcome to another episode, an exciting, thrilling season of footy. We are up to almost halfway through the season, which is only just a couple of rounds away, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. How has your week been, Michael?
Sammy, absolute pleasure to be here. It has been a pretty good week, I got to be honest. And I was in LA over the weekend and lots going on, particularly with the NBA playoffs, the Lakers in a bit of strife. And my word, Dodgers, were all the talk of the town as well. They won in a thrilling game there at Dodger Stadium. And yeah, mate, there's a real buzz around LA just with, a lot of the entertainment events that go on. But also, sport is massive there too, even though, the LA Dodgers are, they're a checkbook team and the Lakers aren't originally from there. There's still, the fans get down and there is a little bit of a class divide there, as we're all probably aware of, but it is just fascinating to sort of be in these different pubs and be watching all these different screens. It's very different to what you see in Melbourne, and it's obviously very different to what you see in Sydney as well, Sammy. I remember I was up there one weekend and it was all, rugby on their screen. So it's just interesting when you go to a different city, different sports going on. I'm sure if you went to a pub in Manchester, it would be another different story. So yes. I'm just fascinated about that, Sammy. But yeah, doing well, mate.
Okay, great. I'm very happy. Of course, we will delve into it a bit more later, but the Baggers get a big scalp. And if you've seen our Instagram story, I was very excited little child at the end of the game. Glad I went to that one. It was a bit, I was thinking before it, I thought, this could be ugly. But it shows it's never as bad as it seems.
Right.
And I think we've got a lot of room to grow still. So we'll save that for later.
Oh, yes, we love it.
We'll get into some of the top stories from this week across the AFL. And, of course, we've spoken about him before, Jamara Ugle-Hagan. To be honest, I think I have avoided over talking about it because I know it's pretty much been in the headlines every week since the start of the season. And this week it's come out, the club has announced official time off. He's taking leave from the club, which I think is a bit ironic now because it seems like he's done that all season pretty much. So I don't think so. Still, we really don't know any more progress to what's happening, which is interesting. And I was thinking about it as a perspective. If he was a player from Carlton, I would be fuming, I think, because you're taking a list spot. I know there's mental health issues at play and that kind of thing, and it's a bit of a grey area, and the AFL doesn't really seem to know, or the club, what to do, because I think with the way the AFL contracts are structured now, it's a lot more player first, and they've got a lot more control. So will we see a new kind of player contract happen? Because I feel like he's really left the Bulldogs in a bit of a lurch, and the fact that he's still got a season in his contract, he's still got another year. If I was a Dogs fan, I would not want to be doing this and battling this season when you're taking a list spot from some young kid that would like to move up into the AFL and get a chance. I think we forget sometimes that it's a privilege for these players. Yes, they've got the skills to get there, but it should be a privilege to play AFL at the top level. And if you abuse that, you should go. You shouldn't get many more chances than he has, I would say. I think there's different things between battling mental health in a way where that it's a serious problem for you, like Harry Mackay, where he had to take some time off for himself. Whereas almost, and it's hard to get a read on that, but it did seem he was taking the piss a bit. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of complex issues there. So, I'm obviously not going to just delve into, all of the things that I assume are going on behind the closed doors. But what I will say, Sammy, is that, we do live in this era of a lot of things being scrutinised just through what personable, I guess, choices players make, and a lot of that leaking online or different Instagram stories and the like. And, I'm just sort of basing it on what I've seen, but, you see him down at cocktail bars and having alcohol and, having a laugh with his mates that aren't at the football club. And you do see that, and then you do think automatically, well, isn't this guy meant to be sort of off the grid, trying to put up with his own issues? And so it's not a good look. The optics are really bad. And as you mentioned there, especially when you put it into the whole, vortex of what a privileged position it is and how hard it is to get into the AFL. Yeah. That is the disappointing aspect. And if the Dogs were doing a lot worse, they've managed to fill his void really well, and they've actually managed to play fantastic footy without him. But had they been under a lot more pressure, this probably would have been heightened even more. And who knows if they were in a worse position, whether there would have been more, I guess, more of an expectation from the club to actually play him or trying to get him back. But I think now they just had to make the decision, didn't they, Sam, where because all of this footage is leaked out, they just had to say, look, we've got to put this to bed. We can't keep talking about when he's going to come back. It's like he's off for the season now. He's not going to play a game this year. And, what they do after that, I mean, it's really at least his Bulldogs career in jeopardy now, you would have to say, because whether his teammates would be tolerant of this, and you'd have to ask them, Sam, that's the big thing, whether his teammates see this and see what he's doing outside of the football club and go, well, wait a minute, we were inside the four walls talking about you being here and you putting in the hard work and you dealing with what you're dealing with.
It would be very frustrating, especially if you're a real dedicated player. And think about the Bond situation. He was injured. He would be dying to get back there. They're working on himself to try and get back, and he sees this unfold in front of his eyes without much control. They can't say bad of other players, of course, but that would be immensely frustrating if that was your teammate.
It would be. And, I'm trying to think back to like some other key forwards that have struggled with mental health. I'm sure Paddy McCartan really struggled when he had concussion issues and was out for a while there. And I actually remember Buddy Franklin, I think, missed the start of a season back in 2015 dealing with mental health issues. And Buddy's kind of a bit more of a quieter type and someone who doesn't necessarily engage with the media too much. But I just wonder, Sam, like if there are some underlying issues there, whether, you hear of football players a lot having coffees with each other and trying to get inspiration and motivation. I just wonder whether for Mara, whether, he would actually benefit from a conversation with a Harry Mackay or with, another key forward that's went through it. Of course, all of these issues are very different. But, as a young forward who you'd like to think has a long career in the game, speaking to someone like a Lance Franklin, who is also, an Indigenous player as well, whether he would benefit from that, if he hasn't already. You just want him, to be back out there playing in the future. And, we spoke before about players making mistakes at the start of their career. And I like to think he's still relatively early on in his career. So hopefully he's just got good mentors around him and he can get himself right and potentially mature a little bit more as well over the journey. So he does play again. And again, hopefully for Bulldog fans out there, it's for them. But at the moment, you'd have to say it's probably less likely than likely.
It's interesting. Yeah, do you expect to see him next year?
Really hard to say, Sam. Really hard to say. Do I expect to see him? I probably do expect to see him. Like you just hear that there's, it's nothing wrong with his body, right? It's more just, taking time off. So you would have to say you expect him to play somewhere next season, but it's really hard to say whether it's going to be with the Dogs. And I think the Dogs have handled it pretty well, just from a PR perspective. But yeah, it's hard to know what's really happening there. Sam, what's your opinion on that?
No, it definitely is, and it does make me wonder, like, if he did end his spot here at the Dogs at the end of the year or whatever, it's very hard to see another club taking him on.
You think, yeah,
from that, yeah, because
even a Geelong that have got a good record in this space.
Well, yes, but I think it's that he's not around the club. The fact that he would be in and out of the club. This day he would turn up, another day he wouldn't. I think there were some compulsory trainings that he missed, and it just doesn't. You want to go and win premierships. You need everything to be right, and all the cracks to be seamed over. And I feel like would be a big undertaking. If so, good luck to him. Hopefully, we can see him back in the future again. Moving on to another controversial topic this week. And a couple of the suspensions. So Paul Curtis, North Melbourne player, has been absolutely flying with them. He's been handed down 3 weeks for his tackle against Port Adelaide. And the AFL world is blowing up about this. And we've spoken many times over the years about concussion and how important it is. But I think they've got this one totally wrong. And I don't know if the AFL think that they can totally eradicate concussion from the game, because I just think if that's what they're thinking, it is so stupid, because there is no way you can fully annihilate that from our game, because it's just we would have to be playing with helmets. Brutally honestly, there is always going to be concussion in our game. Yes, if we can bring it down to a safe level, and the stuff that they've brought in, so dangerous tackles and heavy high-headed bumps and clashes, that I can understand. But I think if you've seen this tackle, you can understand that there's not much else you can do in that moment, and you can look at it in slow motion and repeat it 100 times and go, oh, he probably could have done that. But this is just 1 second, a millisecond this guy had to tackle him and make these decisions. For a young player, I just think they're asking too much of the players. I don't know about you, but there's not much more that he could have done. I know they're saying they could have rolled him, but the momentum of the thing, and the opposition player just fell to his knees. So, of course, you're going to lean forward and that's going to happen. I don't know, Michael.
Look, straight out of the gates, it's a bad decision. It's a really bad decision. And I really feel for Paul Curtis, especially. We'll talk about the fixture later, but North Melbourne having a marquee game, they don't get a lot of them. And, this is a really informed player for them. Yep. And, it's just really disappointing for North's chances in that game to have a player missing and a really good player of that. But regardless of what player it was.
Sorry, especially after the weeks that they've had
put
a really good
some
performance.
Good weeks. Yeah, they really did, and so it's disappointing on that merit alone. But regardless of what player it was, and whether it's a 300 game player or first or second gamer, it's like you are brought up. Players are criticised if they're not hard enough at the footy. Players, would get scrutinised for having missed tackles. The last thing you want is for players to not play on instinct. You'd have a very robotic game if that happens, Sam. And as you mentioned rightly, it's a very hard game to avoid concussion in. I still remember an incident when I was playing footy in year 8 or year 9. I copped like an errant elbow to the head trying to bend down and get the footy, and I was concussed and I don't remember the rest of the game, and it was just a really innocuous thing. I mean, any kind of contact sport, it's bound to happen. It's almost implicit. So on that alone, the the match review should be very cognizant of that, but they're not. And so it's very confusing for players. And I know there's been weeks where they've really knuckled down on it. And the following week, you'll see what players are doing is that, players are really well drilled these days. And I know that's a really strong emphasis from the coaching staff, Sam, where they, you can see like players will almost like nestle the player to the ground with care. And like, the players are really good at that. I think we've got to give the players significant credit. Like the way tackling has changed over the last, I don't know how long, I'm going to say probably the last 10 years is really significant. Like the absolute howlers where you see players driven to the ground or players' knees taken out. You're not seeing that anymore. So it's now got to a point where things are in slow motion, they're brought down, and you can't judge something on slow motion like that because it's a game that happens in real time. So I think this is a really disappointing moment, but I hope that something comes out of this in the way where, they kind of, they take a bit more of a humanitarian approach on it because, this is just really disappointing.
But see, the thing that even perplexes me, like 3 weeks. It's not 1 week.
One you could maybe understand, right? One would just be based on the outcome that the opposition player that was in a helpless position was injured. Like 1 week just based off that, but 3 show like is a decision based that they thought the action was dangerous and it was intentional and it wasn't. Yes. And so that's the disappointing part. You're right.
Yeah. All right, and a bit of backlash from Paul Curtis and his teammates. I noticed Paul Curtis changed his Instagram profile picture to the AFL logo, but with the ATFL, the Australian Touch Football League.
Oh, wow. Yep. I love this. The better.
Yeah, and Luke Parker said, can't wait to play touch footy against Essendon on Thursday night. So,
wow.
So,
I love it.
Yeah. And moving on, we'll quickly get to this other story. So, back on North Melbourne, and we all know about every week, Kane Cornes said something new, could be controversial, but they've actually banned an interview with Channel 7 on, I think it was, Thursday night that they were going to have in the rooms, and now they've asked that Kane to not have the interview anymore, which I don't know how often we see media banned from just on something that they've said during the week. I know he does say a lot of stupid things sometimes, but what do you think about this one? So for context, I think he said that Harry Sheezel was stat padding, that he was getting stats where easy balls and that kind of thing, which I don't know. For a young player in a struggling North, I feel like that's, I don't know. What do you think about those comments to start off with?
Oh, look, they're not great comments. And, Sheezel wouldn't be doing that intentionally. Let's just make that perfectly clear. He's there to play Aussie rules football and to win games for North Melbourne. So obviously it's not a great comment, but it's nothing really sinister. So I think it's a definite overreaction to then ban Kane Cornes. But look, maybe it's just for this week, Sam, just to maybe teach him a lesson like, hey, don't go so hard at like one of our players who we really like and respect and know he's not that kind of caliber player. So maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it might. Maybe Kane goes harder now because he's been banned. But I don't know. I think it's a bit of an overreaction.
Yeah, I would say so. And the fact that they said he was bullying him, which I think was a bit of an overreach as well. I know Kane does say a lot of things without consequences. And so for once he said something's gone his way. Right. Maybe that's not a bad thing. But in saying that, you are right. It is a bit over the top, a bit ridiculous. So I think we will leave the story at that because I'm sure.
Can you remember this happening to other, like in AFL? Like I can't really think of a time where that's happened.
Not really.
I mean, I know I know there's rival clubs. You know, it was interesting. Essendon mic'd up Travis Cloke on Anzac Day, and of course, you know, used to play for Collingwood. He's now, I believe, doing some VFL coaching for Essendon. And I really liked the fact that Essendon's cameras were following him around mic'd up, and he was talking to some of his ex-Collingwood, you know, players, and Nathan Buckley was there from the 7 team or wherever he is now, and, you know, they shook hands. And so I like to see it when it's, you know, like when an old player goes and speaks to his old club. But yeah, I just think, even if it's like Mark Rasciuto not going into Port Adelaide rooms because, you know, the clubs don't like each other, it doesn't mean, you know, the individual's trying to do any harm.
Exactly. All right. Last story before we get into the big round preview. We've gotten through a lot of stories today. Jayden Stephenson. This is a bit of a funny one. So he's came out with a story that in his debut season, he spent a huge amount on Uber Eats. So I guess it's a bit exciting. You get a massive pay packet in your first season, probably money that you've never seen in your life before. And you probably don't know what to do with a lot of it.
Right.
This is why a lot of player managers and organisers are financial advisors, so you can put money away and be smart with it. But this probably was not so smart. So the figure... He's come out and said he spent on Uber Eats in his debut season $28,000.
Wow.
Which is insane. Now, I'm trying to gather my head around because it's usually what? You're ordering, say, Macca's to come around your house, probably $30.
Yeah.
Maybe
$30,
a bit less.
$40, yeah.
If you can do the quick maths, how many and you've got to be playing underweight and all this kind of thing as well. What is he getting? Is he getting Powerades to his house or his meals every night? It is insane.
Well, that's like I divided 40 into 2,800, whatever it was. You know, like that's like I was looking. It's like 700 orders of $40 worth. Like, you know, there's only 365 days. So, he's ordering it more than once, maybe a day in some circumstances. Yeah. And, I mean, if he's ordering for, teammates in his house, assuming that he shared in his first year, then, maybe some of the bills might be up near $100. But that's freaking crazy, Sam, to think about that. Wow. And just the fact that, you've got these other players like Christian Petrarca that seem to be so conscious and cooking multiple meals a day and all these special plans as well, as you said. I can understand having a feed after a game. There's nothing better. You've ran a lot. Your team may have won.
I tell you what, you get hungry. You get real hungry.
You really do. So, I can understand maybe him ordering 2 of those meals, after a game potentially, but gosh, wow. I don't know. I'd love to see some of the places he ordered from. If it's Macca's every time, and he's the skinny bugger, because he was really skinny in that first season, Sam. So wow.
I would love to see. Uber probably can't put this out for privacy reasons, but the top 10 customers for Uber Eats in Australia. See if there's a few names on there you recognise.
Oh yeah.
How brilliant would that be? Maybe a few people would be a bit more conscious of their Uber Eats spending if it was displayed. Mine's not that much, but it's probably a decent amount.
Oh yeah, like are we talking several times a week kind of gear? No.
Maybe once a week.
Right. Yeah, for a treat. Get you. Wow, savvy boy. Wow.
All right. Big round 8 ahead. Now, I don't know if you counted your tipping last week, but and I'm sure a lot of people had good weeks. I got 8 out of 9 last week.
Yeah.
Dogs are the only one that held me off.
What was the game that you got wrong?
So
the Dogs and Giants, and I think I tipped the Dogs in that one by memory, but I didn't. I wasn't brave enough to tip the Blues, and I remember distinctly on that episode I had a good feeling, and I should have followed it, Sammy boy. But anyway, yes, that was a good round of tipping. I think a lot of people did well, as you mentioned there. But every week you got to tip at least one upset because it's a trend.
All right, Thursday night we begin 7:30. Essendon and North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. Just left a bit of a sour note with this game now. I really would have loved to seen, especially George Wardlaw being out as well
Yes.
for North Melbourne.
That's a big blow.
But we'll look at the ins and outs. So Bailey Scott, Will Phillips, Finbar Maley in for North Melbourne. Out Darcy Tucker and, as mentioned, Paul Curtis and George Wardlaw. Essendon, Elijah Stardust in. Out Dylan Shield. Get your marshmallows.
Yes, marshmallows. Of course, Kevin Sheedy, Dennis Pagan there. Apparently the whole thing was made up. But look, we love this rivalry. This is like an underrated one. There were some great clashes in the 90s between the two pillar forwards in Lloyd and Kerry, and there were some great finals thrown in there as well. Some incredible thrillers. I think the Dons came from some ridiculous margin down to beat the Roos in a final. And then of course the Roos came back from a decent margin in a final of recent times, and of course the big Frank the Tank Drew Petrie. That still hurts to watch that back. Up at halftime by 30 points. Anyway, so there's been some good clashes over the journey. Of course, the Brad Scott Cup, this particular roster, and of course the Todd Goldstein Cup these days as well.
Yes.
So Cherry versus Goldstein, the guy that kind of pushed him out the door. Of course, Sherry in very good form. Sherry baby. Anyway, so it's a good clash, but as you said, those outs for North really do hurt them. They were much improved last week, but just pretty inaccurate in front of goal. Even the big Suvalaki, who's usually got his footy kicking boots on, wasn't so good. North just fell short in that game. Just some of their disposal efficiency let them down.
It was really good crack. Really good.
It was a really good crack. They needed that, especially after the Good Friday showing. They really lowered their colours. You compare it to Richmond, who did they go down to? They went down to they were very valiant in their performance, and you kind of
Demons.
The Demons, and then you liken it to, sort of North just falling on their sword. So, you just want to see some fight, and I think Essendon are gettable, but at the same time, the Dons had some really good patches in Anzac Day, and, a couple of youngsters, as we've mentioned, I think first or second youngest team in the comp, the Bombers at the moment, and the fact that they had, so many players that looked pretty good at the level, Kako and Caddy and Archie Roberts, a couple of young players playing their first ever Anzac Days, certainly stood up and didn't crumble under the pressure. So, really good signs there, Sam. I think Shield is getting a rest. He's been really good, and clearly they're going to manage him this season because he's a real impact burst player. But interesting time slot, this one, and we'll talk about the fixture in totality, later. But in general, interesting kind of slot, this one, Sam.
Thursday night, I can see why they did it. I think, I guess we'll get to that. But it did look like it was warming up to be a bigger game than probably it would have been, and the AFL probably thought that Northwood might be in a bit stronger position than they are at the moment. As much as I was excited to see an exciting more North Melbourne side, I think those outs too much for them, and Bombers will be wanting a win. So I'm just going to take the Dons in this one. Friday night, 7:40 at Marvel Stadium. St Kilda take on the Fremantle Dockers. Teams aren't out for those games beyond that at the moment, so we can only stipulate without that. But Dockers, impressive.
Yep.
Solid against the Crows in that game. And we're starting to see the fruits kind of develop of what was talked about pre-season from them. And the Saints off a disappointing path. I know on a disappointing path, I would say. I know there's a lot of criticism this week about kind of the sprays that coaches giving to the young players.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. This is a chance for Saints to get back. I think pretty sure they've had some good clashes in the past, Saints and Freo. I feel like, going all the way back to the Siren Gate.
Oh, sorry. That was a good one. Chris Connolly.
Yeah, so if you don't know about that one, the siren didn't go off. Where were they playing? Tasmania? It was like 2000.
They were playing in Tasmania. It was a really odd fixture, that one.
Yeah.
And it was a draw, right, Sam? Was it, or did the Saints win? I can't remember. Anyway, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, there was a lot to it.
Yeah.
Fremantle, I'm going to stick with here and feel a bit more comfortable with them. Saints still seem a bit away.
Yeah, Fremantle are a little bit of a different side away from home. This is one thing we've got to be wary of. They seem to play the G okay, but of course they did lose that game to Melbourne, and that was as I said at the time, a real opportunity for them to really continue that momentum. But very good win against Adelaide. I mean, they're big players in the midfield, whether it's Andrew Brayshaw, whether it's Caleb Sarong. They've got some real stars running through there at the moment. They get Hayden Young back, who adds a little bit of class and polish and dash as well. Fremantle, as we've spoken about on the show before, they can be really dour at times. They can be really boring, methodical to watch. But when they actually take on the game, they've got enough line breakers. You got Shai Bolton, who can just about do anything, forward of centre. And yeah, they've got enough stars on that list to really make opposition teams sweat. And you get it into that forward line, Sam, they've got enough key pillars there to do some damage. So, yeah, I think just based on form, you've got to tip the Dockers in this one. But at the same time, if the Saints bring their pressure, Sam, and they're playing at Marvel, expect it to be a harder game to play. And of course, as we know, if the Saints, they did beat Geelong at Marvel Stadium early in the year, but at the same time, the Saints have been on a real decline, and it's been pretty disappointing. And just quickly on the Ross thing, Sam, I understand, if the Saints are competing at the pointy end and you're dragging players that are expected to do better. I still remember Luke Ball's treatment in that 2009 grand final, and the guy walked the next year. So you've got to be careful with those kind of individual sprays and individual drags. I mean, you're 12, 13 minutes into the game and you're already dragging the guy. I don't necessarily know if it was fully necessary, especially it puts pressure on the rest of your list, particularly if you get injuries later in the game. So, yeah, Ross can pull some levers, and I'm a big Ross Lyon fan, but yeah, whether that was completely necessary, not entirely sure, Sam, but yeah, Freo for me in this one.
Saturday, we move on to and Western Bulldogs and Port Adelaide kick things off at 1:20 p.m. up in cold Ballarat. Interesting always these games at Ballarat for the Bulldogs. Interesting. Port Adelaide, they will be a bit shocked and whirlwind after the crazy over the line against North last week. And as we mentioned, Dogs playing very well, upset against the Giants. So I expect them to keep rolling here and have a magnificent performance over Port at Ballarat.
Yeah, I'll keep this one short. I agree, Sam. I think the Dogs are, one of the informed teams of the competition right now, and Bont just slotting back in again. I just think the Bulldogs midfield has just been ultra impressive, probably exceeding their expectations. You look at Joel Frazier, who's doing some really good stuff in the midfield, in the engine room. You think of Riley Sanders, the big colonel, doing his thing in there. I know a lot of Dogs fans were very quick to jump on, him when he wasn't doing so well, but he's an absolute beast, an absolute accumulator. And yeah, there's a reason why there was so much hype around him. But yeah, a lot of role players in that team, Sam, just doing their bit. And look, if the Power win, what's that, 4 on the trot? Not a lot of people kind of expected that. It would be a huge win away from home. And as we've spoken about before on the show, Sam, a very emotional side. So it wouldn't surprise me if they had a little bit of a stir, particularly with, the adverse conditions that you sometimes do get in Ballarat. But tipping the Dogs, safe tip for this one.
Do you think they drive Port? No, they must fly. Where would they fly to?
I guess Melbourne and then
Yeah,
drive up,
and
right?
bust up,
Like,
yeah.
unless is Avalon Airport closer? I'd have to look at a map, but
Yeah,
no.
bit of a weird one.
Yeah. Well, they're not driving from Adelaide, I don't think.
Okay, 4:15 p.m. Adelaide Crows take on Carlton at the Adelaide Oval. Blues in an interesting spot now.
Yes.
Positive, and I think the Carlton fans who were going for the coach's head just a few weeks ago should be biting their tongue now and apologising, because I know all clubs have these fans, but oh God, that was annoying. Like seriously. Anyway,
you were all for Voss though, Sam. You've been consistent on this,
Yes.
like since the first show. You're like that. It's never as good, never as bad. It's not super glaring. Fix a few things. We still got great players. It'll turn. You were confident on that, so I got to give you credit, Sam. You stuck by your Blues and by your coach, and now you're starting to see the fruits. So no, that wasn't every single fan, and they've all of a sudden went very quiet.
Big game, this one. Of course, Adelaide playing fairly well this season. A few hiccups here and there. And Blues do not have a good record against Adelaide Oval. Either that or Port. We've never won a game there.
I still can't believe that.
So, but the positive thing, I think, Gather Round can kind of impact that now, because just a few weeks ago, we won against West Coast there. Last year, of course, we won there against Freo. So, yes, it wasn't one of the local teams, but we have won on that ground and won recently.
Yes.
So, I think that is a massive positive that we can take out of that. And, wow, wouldn't it be something if we can get this dub? The Blues train will be rolling.
I completely agree, Sam. That was a massive win against the Cats. I mean, what a confidence booster. You know, the jury was out. You know, who have the Blues bet? You seem to beat up on North and West Coast when you do play them, which not every club can do, let's be real. But, you know, there was the jury was out about who have you bet, and, you know, beating Geelong, they are a contender. And so that was a massive performance. And you know, I messaged you at halftime. I said, Sammy, how you feeling? And you're still a little nervous, but you got the dub in the end. And, just some really impressive performances by, just, you know, some of your younger players, but also your key players just continuing to stand up. I mean, Jacob Wiedering, mate, like I just look at that guy and I just think, wow, he is the figure of stability in that back line. And I think there's a great bit of footage out there of him and Dangerfield going at it and just did not lose body and just continued to put the pressure on the champ. And I mean, he just holds the sway there for your back line. So very impressive performance by him as always. But you know, Sam, I was looking at the injury list by Adelaide. They do think Riley Philthorpe will play after dislocating his finger, but it looks as though I think Matt Crouch might be out for this one, and Murray as well, Nick Murray. So they've got a couple of outs there, which otherwise would have probably been playing this game. So I'm actually leaning towards the Baggers in this one, Sammy. I don't know. You guys are the informed team, and I think the Crows under a little bit of pressure now, I got to say, and they got to back up at home. But I don't know. I got a funny feeling.
Okay.
And I don't know what that means, Sammy. But
I think we've not had a good record. I think we lost to them in Melbourne last year as well. So yes, they bet us at Marvel by 2 points last year. So there would be some spite there, I would say. So
I reckon.
Come on, the Baggers. Let's keep rolling.
Lids off if you win this one, I think. This is a great matchup. This is a really good time for both teams to play each other, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. 7:35, Collingwood take on Geelong at the MCG. Speaking of mouth-watering matchups.
Oh, jeez. Game of the round, Sammy.
Yeah, they always put up a good clash when Collingwood and Geelong play. We know we had I think, was it the prelim a couple of seasons back? They played many a final against each other, and Offa lost one of them, and Geelong, and the way that the footage, and I think it was damning. It was so good to see that footage of Chris Scott pulling up one of those Bunnings warehouse plastic chairs in the rooms and just sitting there looking defeated. You don't often see Chris Scott in that way. And he didn't say it in the press conference. I will whack him for this because he didn't give any Carlton credit. He said that it was the worst he'd seen Geelong played, which I think is garbage.
Yeah, it's disrespectful, isn't it?
Yes. In saying that, I will expect them to bounce back here, of course. I would say playing under him, you would be a player with... I wouldn't want to be playing bad under Chris Scott.
Oh, no. Definitely not, Sammy boy.
So I'm expecting to see a major response from them. However, Collingwood are on top of the ladder at the moment, and I'm expecting to get this done. Shoot me down. What is wrong with me? I need to wash my mouth out.
Sammy boy. Wow. But the Pies, my gosh, since opening round, they haven't lost a game, which is really sad for us supporters. But
yeah,
I mean, they've just been in great form. I mean, still side bottom, turning back the clock on Anzac Day to win, I think his second Anzac Day medal. So he always plays well in those big games, and he just does not look like he's lost a yard or two. He's been impressive. Obviously, it's a big occasion. Nick Dacos captains the side and does brilliantly. And yeah, they don't have too many chinks in their armour at the moment, the Pies. So they are in ripping nick, and they just played the conditions better, I felt, on Anzac Day as well. They just, it was a wet weather game, and to kick over 100 points clearly shows their dominance. And I just think the gap between the two teams as well, Sammy. I mean, Essendon, as we spoke about before, a lot of players under 100 games, and the Pies are the oldest list in history. So there's a reason why they're doing well, and there's a reason why these two teams always produce classics, Sammy. It's because the teams don't bottom out. I mean, Collingwood, yes, you can say have made a few dips, but they've gotten back there very quickly. So these two clubs, annoyingly for a lot of other fan bases, including our own, just don't seem to go away. This is a tough one to tip, and I'm going to tip the Pies just based on form. But yeah, do expect a response by the Cats, I would imagine.
Okay, West Coast Eagles and Melbourne, 7:35, Optus Stadium.
Yeah, look, there was a bit of a danger game here for Melbourne. I think last season they may have lost to them, and Harley Reid put on an absolute clinic, fending off players like Christian Petrarca and Clayton Oliver. But yeah, the D's are actually in some really decent form at the moment, and Max Gawn just continues to go strength to strength. We talk about him every week. Sammy?
Yeah, interesting one. Yeah, he played the game of his life last week. So there is a few strings holding up Melbourne still, I think. Yes, they got the win against crazy Richmond. But Richmond had that first half of the game all over. So it wasn't till the second half that we kind of really saw any changes. I still think they're very vulnerable here, and I'm going to take the Eagles to get their first win the week after the Demons get their first win.
Whoa, Sammy boy. I love the confidence. Of course, yeah, D's back-to-back wins against Fremantle and against Richmond. They've been teams that are a little bit suspect. Win, yeah, a little bit suspect, but yeah, I mean, this is a real tough one to tip. I'm just going to stick with Melbourne just in this, just because I think they've got a better list. But if the Eagles bring their full effort, I could see them winning this one too, Sammy. Just not brave enough.
I think we need to get, because we haven't recorded our tips down, but if you can work on getting a tips tally. If you can
I think we should do it. At school, I used to be the tip guy, Sammy. I used to print out all the schedules. I used to mark all of them. I used to change my own tip. No, I didn't do that. Well, maybe once or twice, but no. Hey, if you're a good tipster, you're a good tipster, through and through. But yeah. Yeah, we should keep tab on it, and we should have a little competition, little friendly competition. Maybe the winner buys a round of beers or something like that, or does that ice bucket challenge again. I don't know. Anyway, we'll figure it out, Sammy boy. Run around the G.
Well,
okay,
Sunday, Sydney Swans take on the GWS Giants in the Sydney Derby. Big games. SCG. What are we thinking here? Sydney... Wow, they still look like they're in a bit of a teething period.
Yep.
I A lot of injuries still for them, but they don't seem to be 100% really hitting their spots. Giving up their lead against Gold Coast last week, pretty ugly way to do it. Am I ruling them completely out for the rest of the season? I don't know. But there is a bit of a dip for them at the moment. Giants losing out last weekend, still confident that they can finish strong this year and be a definite contender. So I think the Giants, I don't know how often they've upset the Swans at the SCG in the big Sydney derby, but I'm taking them.
Yeah, Giants for me as well, Sam. But I got to say, like the Swans to cough up, I think, 12 goals in a row. You don't see 12-goal runs that often. And especially the Swans, usually they're able to curtail that kind of momentum. But, yeah, very disappointing, particularly at home, for them not to be able to do something. That was real shocking.
The last time they coughed that up would have been the grand final, wouldn't it? Or the last two.
Oh, maybe, Sammy boy. So maybe some scars opening there. Ooh.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, interesting indeed. But Chad Warner did sign on. That is massive news because I think the Western Australian clubs were circling, in particular Fremantle. So, look, we know how good the Chad is. I mean, he burst onto the scene and was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And yeah, I think he always struck me as a one-club player for the Swans. So, wonderful for him to get that signature. But does it change the way they bounce in this game? I'm not particularly sure, Sam, but they're in a bit of an ominous spot right now, the Swannies.
Hawthorn take on Richmond, 3:20 Sunday MCG. It's Hawthorn's centenary game, 100 years for the Hawthorn Footy Club. It was good to see some of the greats holding up the cups and remind us how much we hate them because they win so many cups.
and the craziest thing about Hawthorn and their history, and we're not going to dwell on this for too long, Sammy, because it's going to hurt too much, but, since the 1960s, to win the amount of flags that they've won, considering they didn't have any up until that stage or very minimal, correct me if I'm wrong, but for them to have won all of that and have all of that success post-1960s, it's a phenomenal turnaround for that club. So if you're born around that sort of 1950s period, you've seen a lot of success and obviously a lot of greats. I mean, arguably the greatest of all time, Lee Matthews played for them as well, the He-Man, and arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time in Alistair Clarkson and Buddy Franklin. Talk about just greats of the game. I mean, they've just had so many. Michael Tuck, 400 game superstar. I mean, it just. That club is just, notorious for creating greats of the game. So I'm sure they'll celebrate well, and they get Richmond at a very good time for this game, Sammy boy.
Yeah. And Richmond have been playing pretty well, so I expect them to stand up to this as well. I think the confidence that they've got at the moment for where they are is really good. So credit to the coach's name is gone. Adam
Uze. Yeah, Uze's been great. Tyrone Vickery Cup though.
Yeah. So Hawthorn expecting to get this done in their special birthday.
Yeah, I think they will. I think it'll be upwards of 40 points, but hope to see a good fight by the Tigers, and hopefully a good crowd at this one, Sammy. I don't know, 100-year anniversaries. I think the Saints got a really good crowd in when they played Essendon for theirs, and obviously Carlton for theirs. So, yeah.
Now, I think you wanted to talk about the fixture because we seen Friday night we got to see the Bulldogs. Why have they put them Sunday afternoon for this one when it's their 100th birthday?
Yeah, I don't quite understand it. I mean, look, a 3:20 time slot is pretty good, Hawthorn Richmond, I got to say. But at the same time, missed opportunity for the 100th anniversary here. I would have loved to see Hawthorn Geelong for a 100th anniversary, but I guess, with Easter Monday, you probably can't take away from that fixture. Perhaps Essendon round one could have been your 100th. I don't know. I feel like maybe the club could have done better with the slot.
They've chosen Richmond because they were the first ever game they played against. So
interesting. Okay, I get that. And then, look, there's been some decent clashes over the journey. But, Sam, what I will say just quickly on the fixture, and I know we're about to get to our last game, but Brisbane Gold Coast, the very last game, this is one of the hottest Q clashes of all time. I would have put that on Thursday night. I would have looked at a completely different time slot, prime time for these two clubs. I would have put Collingwood and Geelong on Friday night to replace St Kilda and Fremantle. And to be honest, I would have put Adelaide and Carlton in this 3:20 time slot. I think it's a good time slot, and I would have liked to see that prime time. And then, potentially the derby you could have put on at a hot fixture, potentially on Saturday night as well. So, look, I like the matchups in this round, Sam. I just don't know about particularly the Thursday and Friday night clashes. They could have capitalised better.
It does seem ironic, the AFL wanting to grow the game in these regions, and they stick these time slots hidden away when it's these biggest games for these. These are
the two derbies, Sam, and they've put them in really boring time slots, to be honest. I know people in Brisbane will get along at 7:20 at night, but a Sunday night just before Monday, it's a late game.
I will stop you just here. So they do have a public holiday the next day.
Okay.
In Queensland.
Okay.
So
well,
there is that.
Well, that does add to it, I think. That's probably a good call. But at the same time, I would have loved to see prime time on this one as well. So interesting, Sammy boy. But let's get to that game.
Yep. So, as you mentioned, 7:20 Sunday night up at the Gabba, Brisbane and the Gold Coast, who are, and as you mentioned, the biggest Q clash we would have to say of all time, right in front of our eyes here. The biggest moment since probably Gold Coast history, really, this game. Since they probably had Gary Ablett at the club and signed him and that kind of thing. So this is a big moment. This is a big moment. If they can get this scalp, all right, I'm going to make a big call here, and this could come back to bite me on the ass. But if Gold Coast win this, they're playing finals.
Yeah, I love it, Sammy. I thought that's where you were going. I love it. I think this is a great call because if they win this game and they beat Brisbane, who have only dropped a game this year and have, they're the reigning premiers, this is a statement. This is a statement. And if you're in the four walls of Gold Coast, you just love to know how they're selling this game. I hope they're selling it like this. This is not just a regular home and away game. And look, they probably correct me if I'm wrong, play each other twice this season. You probably have two looks at them, but this is a ultra important clash considering the form lines. And Gold Coast, as we've said, they don't want for much, but this is their biggest test probably since the Adelaide game. This is probably their biggest test. So, Sammy, are you brave enough to tip them with your big call?
Yes, I am. I
love it. Oh, mate, I want to tip them. I do want to tip them. I want this to happen.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tip Brisbane. I'm just going to tip them just based on the Gabba. But do I hope the Gold Coast win to see that? I would actually like to see it, Sam. I'd like to see it. I would like to see it. Wow.
Wow, what a big round ahead. Look forward to enjoying all the sweet AFL treats that they service this weekend.
This is great. Matchups all round, Sammy.
I feel like the last few rounds we've kind of had maybe one or two games and a few flat. A lot of games were flat, but I feel like this is going to be a good round to watch this week.
This is great.
One more tip. Anthony Albert and Easy or Peter Dutton. That's the final clash of this weekend. Of course.
Wait a sec. I've been away, and my mum messaged me today and she's like, "Are you on the electoral commission?" I'm like, I think because I've lived overseas for a certain amount of time. I hope this doesn't come back to bite me, by the way, but I have to double check that. But federal elections happening, Sammy.
Yes, it is.
Damn.
On Sunday, democracy sausage. So I've already voted, but I think how it works if you are overseas, you still do, but you have to go to the embassy, or at least post to the embassy, or something like that. I'm not sure.
I better look into that. I just thought it was like a local election when my mum messaged me.
No.
Wow. Okay.
The big one.
Oh, wow.
And I think we can all celebrate when the political ads disappear off the TV because they have been horrible to watch.
I can imagine, but not to mention some of the like they've clearly hired millennials to do some of the Instagram and TikTok ads because they had a lava chicken version of I was like, what the hell? Elbows on the chicken. It's tasty as hell. Or he's going to hell. I can't remember what the wordplay was.
What a strange way to finish this episode of In the Ballpark.
Yeah.
We don't often go down the political route, and but there we go. Signing week of footy ahead. Hope you enjoyed. Stay up to date on our Instagram, all our social medias, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. And if you've enjoyed, give us a rate too.
Give us a rate, yeah.
Spotify rating or iTunes, Apple Podcast rating. Yep. Give us a crack as well, all right?
Give us a crack.
Give us a
Head over the ball. Don't get 3 weeks. All right.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
For all your news, reviews, and previews this AFL season,
Listen to In the Ballpark. Download the podcast now.